In a quiet corner of Chicago, where the city's chaos seemed to fade into the hum of everyday life, there lived a man named Marcus Johnson. To his neighbors, he was an unremarkable figure, a tall, lean man with dark skin and piercing eyes who kept mostly to himself. He wasn't one for small talk or neighborhood gatherings. Instead, Marcus spent his days tending to his modest home and caring for his loyal companion Max, a German shepherd with fur as black as midnight. Max was more than just a pet. He was Marcus's family, his confidant, and the one constant in a life that had seen too much change. Marcus's past was something he rarely spoke about, even to those closest to him. If anyone had bothered to ask, they might have noticed the way his hands trembled slightly when he thought no one was looking, or how his gaze would sometimes drift far away, as though he were seeing something no one else could. But no one asked. And Marcus preferred it that way. What his neighbors didn't know, and what Marcus worked hard to keep hidden, was that he had once been someone else entirely. Before settling into this quiet suburban existence, Marcus had gone by another name: the Ghost. The Ghost wasn't just a nickname. It was a title earned through years of ruthless efficiency. In the world of organized crime, few names carried as much weight. Marcus had been a hitman, a man hired to eliminate targets without leaving a trace. His skills were unmatched, his reputation untouchable. Whether it was a rival gang leader or a corrupt politician, Marcus always got the job done. He moved like a shadow, striking swiftly and vanishing before anyone realized what had happened. But after years of living in the shadows, Marcus grew tired of the bloodshed. The thrill of the hunt faded, replaced by an emptiness that gnawed at him day and night. One night, after completing what would be his final mission, Marcus walked away from that life forever. He changed his name, left the city, and vowed never to look back. For nearly a decade, Marcus succeeded in keeping his past buried. He found peace in his new life, filling his days with simple pleasures. There was gardening in the backyard, long walks with Max, and evenings spent reading by the fireplace. It was a quiet, ordinary existence, the kind most people took for granted but which Marcus cherished deeply. Max became the center of his world. The dog's unwavering loyalty and unconditional love reminded Marcus of everything good that remained in humanity. Together they formed a bond so strong that it felt unbreakable. Little did Marcus know, however, that their peaceful life was about to be shattered in the cruelest way possible. It was a sunny afternoon when tragedy struck. Marcus had run out to pick up groceries, leaving Max tied up in the front yard as usual. The street was quiet, save for the occasional car passing by. Everything seemed normal until it wasn't. A group of young men approached, their swagger unmistakable. They were members of the Black Vipers, a notorious gang known for terrorizing the neighborhood. Loud, reckless, and dangerous, they ruled the streets with intimidation and violence. When they spotted Max, they mistook him for a stray dog wandering too close to their territory. Without hesitation, they surrounded him, laughing and jeering. At first, it seemed like harmless taunting, but things quickly escalated. One of the gang members kicked Max, sending him yelping in pain. Another joined in, throwing rocks and shouting insults. Max barked furiously, trying to defend himself, but he was outnumbered and restrained by his leash. The attack lasted only a few minutes, but it felt like an eternity. By the time the gang members grew bored and moved on, Max lay motionless, his body battered and broken. Blood pooled beneath him, staining the sidewalk red. When Marcus returned, home, grocery bags in hand, the sight that greeted him stopped him cold. For a moment, he couldn't breathe. The vibrant, lively dog that had greeted him every day with wagging tail and joyful barks was gone. In its place was a lifeless form, still tethered to the post where Marcus had left him. Dropping the bags, Marcus rushed to Max's side, his heart pounding wildly. He cradled the dog in his arms, calling his name over and over, hoping against hope that Max would respond. But there was nothing. No movement, no sound, only silence. Tears streamed down Marcus's face as he held Max close, rocking back and forth like a child clinging to a lost toy. The grief was overwhelming, a tidal wave of emotion that threatened to drown him. But beneath the sorrow lay something darker, something far more dangerous. Rage. Pure, unrelenting rage. As Marcus sat there, clutching Max's body, memories of his past began flooding back. Images of faces he'd erased, lives he'd ended, all for money, power, or revenge. He had sworn never to return to that life, never to let violence define him again. But now, staring at the lifeless form of his beloved companion, Marcus felt the old instincts stirring within him. This wasn't just about Max anymore. It was about justice, about making sure the people responsible paid for what they had done. That night, Marcus buried Max under the big oak tree in the backyard. He dug the grave himself, working tirelessly until his hands were raw and blistered. As he lowered Max's body into the earth, Marcus whispered a promise. "I'll make them pay," he said, his voice low but filled with conviction. "Every single one of them." The words felt foreign yet familiar, like slipping into an old coat that still fit perfectly despite years of disuse. Marcus knew what he had to do. He couldn't bring Max back, but he could ensure that his death wouldn't be in vain. With a heavy heart and a mind already plotting revenge, Marcus stood up and wiped away his tears. The grieving pet owner was gone. In his place stood a man driven by purpose, a man who would stop at nothing to avenge the one creature he had ever truly loved. Over the next few days, Marcus transformed. Gone was the quiet, reserved man who blended seamlessly into the background. In his place was a calculating strategist, meticulously planning every detail of his campaign against the Black Vipers. Using skills honed during his years as the Ghost, Marcus began gathering intelligence on the gang. He learned their routines, their hideouts, and their leadership structure. He memorized their faces, studied their movements, and identified their weaknesses. Every piece of information brought him closer to his goal. Unlike his past missions, which had been fueled by greed or obligation, this one was different. This time, it was personal. Marcus started small, testing the waters to see how the gang would react. Late one night, he broke into one of their safe houses, a rundown apartment building used for storing weapons and drugs. Moving silently, he disabled the security cameras and planted false evidence implicating a rival gang. Then, just as quickly as he had arrived, he vanished into the night. Within hours, rumors began spreading among the Black Vipers. Someone was watching them. Someone was messing with their operation. Panic rippled through the ranks, but no one could figure out who or what they were dealing with. For Marcus, it was exactly the reaction he wanted. The game was on. As the days turned into weeks, Marcus stepped up his efforts. He targeted lower-level members of the gang, picking them off one by one. Each strike was precise, designed not only to weaken the gang but also to send a message. One evening, 2 enforcers were found unconscious in an alley, their faces bruised and swollen. Another time, a drug deal went horribly wrong when the buyer mysteriously disappeared along with the cash. The Black Vipers were rattled, unsure of who or what they were fighting against. Some joked nervously about ghosts, while others insisted it was a rival gang trying to muscle in on their territory. No one suspected the truth, that a lone man, armed with nothing but his wits and decades of experience, was systematically dismantling their empire. Through it all, Marcus remained invisible, a phantom haunting the edges of their world. He operated with surgical precision, leaving behind no clues, no witnesses. Yet for all his skill, there was a part of him that struggled with what he was doing. The old Marcus, the hitman who killed without hesitation, wouldn't have thought twice about taking lives. But this Marcus was different. He was motivated not by hatred or greed, but by love. Love for Max, and for the life they could have shared if not for the senseless cruelty of others. That thought kept him going, even on the darkest nights when doubt crept in. By the end of the month, Marcus had become a legend. Whispers of the Ghost spread throughout the city, blending fact and fiction into myth. People spoke of a mysterious figure who struck fear into the hearts of criminals, avenging wrongs and delivering justice where none existed. To some, he was a hero. To others, a monster. But to Marcus, none of it mattered. All that mattered was honoring Max's memory and ensuring that those who had taken him away would never hurt anyone else again. The Black Vipers were not accustomed to fear. For years they had ruled the streets with an iron fist, their reputation built on intimidation and violence. But as Marcus's campaign of vengeance intensified, cracks began to form in their once unshakable facade. The gang members who had strutted around the neighborhood like kings now moved cautiously, their eyes darting nervously at every shadow. Whispers of the ghost followed them everywhere, a phantom figure who seemed to appear out of thin air, striking swiftly and disappearing without a trace. No one knew who he was or where he came from, but everyone agreed on one thing: he was dangerous. Darius Kane, the leader of the Black Vipers, watched his empire crumble with growing frustration. A tall, muscular man with a scar running down his left cheek, Darius prided himself on being untouchable. He had built the gang from the ground up, turning it into one of the most feared organizations in Chicago. But now, for the first time, he felt powerless. His men were dropping like flies, some beaten within an inch of their lives, others simply vanishing altogether. Even worse, the attacks seemed random, unpredictable. One night it would be a stash house raided. The next, a key member ambushed while walking home. There was no pattern, no rhyme or reason to the chaos. It was as though they were fighting a ghost, and maybe, Darius thought grimly, that's exactly what they were dealing with. Desperate to regain control, Darius called an emergency meeting at the gang's main hideout, an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. The building was dimly lit, its walls covered in graffiti and its air thick with cigarette smoke. Around a rickety table sat the remaining core members of the Black Vipers, their faces etched with worry. Darius paced back and forth, his boots echoing against the concrete floor. "We need to figure out who's doing this," he growled, slamming his fist onto the table. "Whoever it is, they're making us look weak, and weakness gets you killed." One of the enforcers, a wiry man named Tyrone, spoke up hesitantly. "What if it's a rival gang? Maybe they're trying to take over our territory." Darius shook his head. "If it was another gang, we'd know by now. They'd have made a move on our operations, tried to claim our turf. This isn't about territory. It's personal. Someone has it out for us, and I want to know why." The room fell silent as the weight of Darius's words sank in. Personal vendettas were far more dangerous than territorial disputes. They couldn't negotiate with someone driven by revenge. Whoever the ghost was, he wasn't playing by the usual rules. Meanwhile, Marcus continued his relentless pursuit of justice. Each strike brought him closer to his ultimate goal, dismantling the Black Vipers entirely. But unlike before, when his missions had been cold and calculated, this time he allowed himself to feel the full weight of his actions. Every punch thrown, every life disrupted was a tribute to Max. He imagined his loyal dog watching over him, urging him forward, reminding him why he couldn't stop, not until the job was done. One evening, Marcus decided to escalate his efforts. He had learned that the Black Vipers were planning a major drug deal, one that would involve several high-ranking members of the gang. If he could disrupt the transaction, it would send a clear message. No one was safe. The location was a secluded parking lot behind an old factory far from prying eyes, perfect for a trap, but also perfect for an ambush. Marcus arrived hours before the scheduled meet, moving silently through the darkness. He disabled the security cameras surrounding the area and planted small devices designed to emit loud noises at specific intervals. These would serve as distractions, drawing attention away from his real plan. Then, using zip ties and duct tape, he rigged the vehicles parked nearby so that their engines would stall the moment they were started. With everything in place, Marcus melted into the shadows, waiting patiently for his prey to arrive. When the Black Vipers finally showed up, they were accompanied by two buyers from a neighboring gang. The group gathered near the center of the lot, exchanging pleasantries and inspecting the product. Just as the deal was about to go down, the first distraction went off, a deafening screech that echoed through the empty space. Startled, The gang members drew their weapons, scanning the area for any sign of danger. Before they could react further, another noise erupted from the opposite side of the lot. Chaos ensued as the men split up, shouting orders and firing blindly into the darkness. It was then that Marcus struck. Emerging from his hiding spot, he moved like lightning, taking out the weakest links first. A swift kick to the knee brought one man down, followed by a precise blow to the temple that rendered him unconscious. Another attempted to fight back, swinging wildly with a knife, but Marcus sidestepped the attack and disarmed him with ease. Within minutes, half the group lay incapacitated, groaning in pain or unconscious on the ground. The surviving members scrambled to retreat, only to discover that their getaway cars wouldn't start. Panic set in as they realized they were trapped. By the time the police sirens wailed in the distance, summoned by anonymous tips placed strategically by Marcus, the scene was a disaster. Bags of drugs lay scattered across the pavement, and the remnants of the Black Vipers fled on foot, abandoning their comrades. As the flashing lights approached, Marcus slipped away unnoticed, blending seamlessly into the night. Back in his quiet, suburban home, he poured himself a glass of whiskey and stared out the window, a faint smile playing on his lips. Justice had been served, for now. Word of the botched deal spread quickly, sending shockwaves through the criminal underworld. The Black Viper's reputation, already fragile, took another hit. Other gangs began circling like vultures, eager to exploit their weakened state. Darius, however, refused to give up. He doubled down on security measures, ordering his men to stay close and avoid venturing out alone. He posted additional guards outside their hideouts and increased patrols throughout the neighborhood. Yet, despite these precautions, the attacks continued. Each new incident chipped away at D grew increasingly desperate. He couldn't shake the feeling that the ghost was always one step ahead, watching, waiting. To counteract the growing paranoia among his ranks, Darius held another meeting. This time he addressed his men with a mix of anger and determination. "Listen up," he barked, pacing furiously. "I don't care how many rumors are floating around about some damn ghost. We're the Black Vipers. We don't bow to legends or myths. From now on, anyone caught talking nonsense about ghosts will answer to me personally." His voice softened slightly as he added, "But we do need answers. So here's what we're going to do. We'll set a trap. Make it look like we've got a big score lined up, something juicy enough to lure this bastard out of hiding. Once he shows his face, we'll take him down." Tyrone raised his hand tentatively. "Boss, what makes you think he'll fall for it? He's been hitting us hard without showing himself. What if he sees through the setup?" Darius smirked confidently. "Because this time we're going to make sure the bait is irresistible. And trust me, when he takes the bait, we'll be ready." Unbeknownst to Darius, Marcus had anticipated such a move. Over the years, he had studied human behavior extensively, understanding that desperation often led people to make reckless decisions. When word reached him about the supposed big score, Marcus immediately recognized it for what it was, a trap. But instead of avoiding it, he saw an opportunity. If played correctly, this could be the final blow needed to bring down the Black Vipers once and for all. Using his network of informants and surveillance skills, Marcus gathered detailed information about the planned operation. He discovered that Darius intended to use a decoy shipment of counterfeit drugs as bait, hoping to catch the ghost in the act. The location was an isolated industrial park surrounded by chain-link fences and minimal lighting, a perfect spot for an ambush. Knowing this, Marcus devised a counterplan that would turn Darius's trap against him. On the night of the operation, Marcus arrived early, cloaked in darkness. He planted additional decoys of his own, fake explosives rigged to create loud bangs and flashes of light. These would serve as diversions, keeping Darius's men busy while Marcus executed the real mission. As the gang members congregated around the fake shipment, tensions ran high. They expected the ghost to show up at any moment, guns blazing. Instead, silence reigned. Suddenly, a series of explosions rocked the area, sending debris flying and startling the gang members. In the ensuing confusion, Marcus struck, picking off the outer guards quietly before moving inward. By the time the Black Vipers realized what was happening, it was too late. Marcus fought with a ferocity born of both skill and sorrow, dismantling the gang piece by piece until only Darius remained. Cornered and trembling, Darius begged for mercy, promising wealth and power if Marcus spared his life. But Marcus wasn't interested in deals or bribes. Calmly, he recounted how Darius's gang had killed Max, an innocent creature undeserving of such brutality. Then with cold efficiency, he delivered the final blow, ending Darius's reign of terror forever. In the aftermath, the Black Vipers crumbled without their leader, their empire reduced to ashes. Marcus disappeared from the neighborhood, leaving behind nothing but whispers of a ghostly figure who exacted vengeance upon those who wronged him. Some say he moved to another city, others believe he vanished completely, retreating to some remote. As the Black Vipers crumbled under Marcus's relentless assaults, Darius Kane found himself trapped in a nightmare of his own making. Once a towering figure of authority and fear, he now looked like a man haunted by shadows. His once confident stride had been replaced by restless pacing, his sharp eyes darting nervously at every sound. The gang that had once thrived under his leadership was now a shell of its former self, its members either dead, missing, or too afraid to leave their homes. The name, The Ghost, hung over them like a curse, a constant reminder of their impending doom. Darius tried everything to regain control. He tightened security around their remaining operations, posting extra guards and rotating shifts to ensure no one could slip through unnoticed. He even reached out to rival gangs, offering alliances or bribes in exchange for protection. But none of it worked. Whoever the Ghost was, he seemed untouchable, a force of nature rather than a man. Every attempt to stop him ended in failure, leaving Darius more desperate and paranoid with each passing day. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in hues of orange and red, Darius sat alone in his dimly lit office, inside the gang's main hideout. The room was cluttered with maps, weapons, and empty liquor bottles, a testament to sleepless nights spent trying to piece together a strategy that might save what little remained of his empire. His mind raced with possibilities, but none of them felt viable. How do you fight someone who doesn't follow the rules? Someone who strikes without warning and vanishes before you can retaliate? It was then that an idea began to form in Darius's head, an idea so bold, so reckless that it bordered on insanity. What if they turned the tables on the Ghost? Instead of waiting for the next attack, why not set a trap? A trap so irresistible that even a phantom couldn't resist walking into it. If they could lure him out into the open, they could finally confront him face to face and end this nightmare once and for all. Determined to act on his plan, Darius called another meeting with his top enforcers. They gathered in the same dingy warehouse where countless strategies had been discussed and failed. This time, however, the atmosphere was different. There was a glimmer of hope in their eyes, a spark of defiance against the seemingly unstoppable force that had tormented them for weeks. Darius stood at the head of the table, his voice steady despite the chaos swirling inside him. "Listen up," he said, slamming his fist on the table to command attention. "We've been running scared long enough. It's time we took the fight. To him. We're going to set a trap, one he won't be able to ignore." Tyrone, ever cautious, frowned. "And how exactly are we supposed to do that? He's already proven he's smarter than us. What makes you think he'll fall for it?" Darius smirked, a flicker of confidence returning to his features. "Because this time, we're giving him something he can't resist. Me." The room fell silent as everyone processed what Darius was saying. He wasn't just proposing a trap, he was putting himself directly in the line of fire. It was a risky move, but Darius knew it was their only chance. "We'll stage a fake deal," he continued. "A big one. Spread the word that I'm meeting with a major buyer, someone willing to pay top dollar for our product. We'll make sure the location is isolated, somewhere he'd expect us to feel safe. And when he shows up, we'll be ready." The plan was simple, yet effective. By using himself as bait, Darius hoped to draw the Ghost out of hiding. To sell the illusion, they would scatter false intel throughout the neighborhood, planting rumors about the deal among local informants and low-level criminals. At the same time, Darius ordered his men to fortify the chosen location, an abandoned slaughterhouse on the outskirts of town. They installed hidden cameras, tripwires, and traps designed to slow down anyone attempting to sneak in undetected. For good measure, Darius stationed his most trusted enforcers nearby, armed to the teeth and prepared to strike at a moment's notice. Unbeknownst to Darius, Marcus had anticipated such a move. Over the years, he had learned to think several steps ahead, analyzing patterns and predicting outcomes with uncanny accuracy. When whispers of the fake deal reached his ears, he immediately recognized it for what it was, a desperate gambit by a cornered animal. Still, Marcus saw an opportunity. If executed correctly, this could be the final confrontation, the moment he dismantled the Black Vipers for good. Marcus spent days preparing for the showdown. He scouted the slaughterhouse, memorizing its layout and identifying potential weak points. Using his knowledge of surveillance systems, he disabled the hidden cameras and rerouted the feeds to display pre-recorded footage, creating the illusion that nothing was amiss. Then he planted decoys of his own, explosive charges rigged to create loud noises and flashes of light, designed to disorient Darius's men and buy him time. On the night of the operation, Marcus arrived early, cloaked in darkness. He moved, like a shadow, slipping past the perimeter guards without making a sound. Inside the slaughterhouse, the air was thick with tension. Darius paced back and forth, clutching a handgun tightly in his hand. Around him, his enforcers crouched behind makeshift barricades, their eyes scanning the shadows for any sign of movement. They were nervous, their fingers twitching on the triggers of their weapons. None of them had ever faced the ghost before, but the stories they'd heard were enough to keep them on edge. Suddenly, a deafening explosion rocked the building, sending shards of glass and metal flying. Panic erupted as the gang members scrambled to respond, firing blindly into the darkness. Another blast followed moments later, this one closer and louder, shaking the foundation of the structure. Amid the chaos, Marcus struck, moving with precision and purpose. He took out the outer guards first, neutralizing them silently before advancing deeper into the slaughterhouse. For Darius and his men, the attack was overwhelming. They had expected the ghost to come alone, but instead, it felt like an entire army was bearing down on them. Explosions echoed through the halls, accompanied by the sound of shattering glass and collapsing walls. In reality, Marcus was working alone, using the environment to amplify the impact of his actions. Smoke bombs filled the air with thick clouds, obscuring vision and forcing the gang members to rely on instinct rather than sight. As the battle raged on, Marcus fought with a ferocity born of both skill and sorrow. Each punch thrown, each life disrupted, was a tribute to Max. He imagined his loyal dog watching over him, urging him forward, reminding him why he couldn't stop, not until the job was done. One by one, the enforcers fell, either unconscious or too injured to continue fighting. By the time Marcus reached Darius, the leader of the Black Vipers was backed into a corner, his gun trembling in his hand. "Please," Darius begged, tears streaming down his face. "I'll give you anything. Money, power, whatever you want. Just let me live." Marcus stared at him coldly, his expression unreadable. For a moment, there was silence, broken only by the distant echoes of the ongoing chaos. Then Marcus spoke, his voice calm but laced with venom. "You took something from me," he said. "Something innocent, something that didn't deserve to die." Darius's eyes widened in realization. "The dog," he whispered hoarsely. "That's what this is about? A damn dog?" "It wasn't just a dog," Marcus replied, stepping closer. "He was family, and now, because of you, he's gone." Without another word, Marcus delivered the final blow, ending Darius's reign of terror forever. The Black Vipers crumbled without their leader, their empire reduced to ashes. As Marcus slipped away into the night, leaving behind only destruction and despair, he felt a strange sense of closure wash over him. The pain of losing Max would never fully fade, but he had honored his companion in the only way he knew how, with justice. In the weeks that followed, stories about the ghost spread far and wide. People spoke of a man driven by love and loss, a man who reminded everyone that even the smallest acts of kindness, like caring for a dog, could inspire the greatest acts of courage. For Marcus, the mission was complete. He had found peace not in revenge itself, but in the knowledge that he had protected what mattered most. And somewhere deep inside, he hoped that Max could see how much he meant, not just to Marcus, but to the legacy of justice he left behind. The aftermath of the slaughterhouse confrontation left the city in a state of shock. News of Darius Kane's death spread like wildfire, igniting both fear and fascination among the residents of Chicago. For years, the Black Vipers had been a symbol of unchecked violence and corruption, their presence casting a dark shadow over the neighborhoods they controlled. Now, with their leader gone and their ranks decimated, the gang dissolved into chaos. Without Darius to hold them together, the remaining members turned on each other, fighting for scraps of power or fleeing the city altogether. The once feared organization crumbled under its own weight, leaving behind only ruins. But while the streets were safer, whispers of the ghost continued to haunt the criminal underworld. No one knew who he was, or if he even existed, but his legend grew with every retelling. Some claimed he was an avenging angel, sent to punish those who preyed on the innocent. Others believed he was a former hitman seeking redemption, using his deadly skills to right wrongs instead of committing them. Whatever the truth, one thing was certain. The ghost had struck fear into the hearts of criminals across the city. His name became a warning, a reminder that justice could come from unexpected places, and that no one was untouchable. For Marcus Johnson, however, the victory was bittersweet. Though he had dismantled the Black Vipers and avenged Max's death, the satisfaction he felt was fleeting. Each night as he sat alone in his quiet suburban home, the silence pressed heavily against him. He missed Max more than ever. The sound of his paws padding across the floor, the warmth of his body curled up beside him, the unconditional love that had filled the emptiness inside Marcus for so long. These memories brought comfort, but they also deepened the ache in his heart. Max was gone, and nothing, not even revenge, could bring him back. Yet amidst the grief, Marcus found himself reflecting on what he had done. This wasn't the first time he had taken lives. It wouldn't be the last either. But this mission had been different. Unlike his days as a hired killer, when violence had been cold and calculated, this time it had been personal. Every punch thrown, every life disrupted had been fueled by love, for Max and for the peaceful life they could have shared. That realization weighed heavily on Marcus. He had walked away from his violent past, hoping never to return, yet here he was, standing knee-deep in bloodshed once again. Despite his internal conflict, Marcus couldn't deny the sense of purpose he had felt during the campaign against the Black Vipers. For weeks he had moved with clarity and focus, driven by a singular goal. It had reminded him of the old days, when every mission had been a puzzle to solve, a challenge to overcome. But now, with the Black Vipers defeated, Marcus faced a new kind of challenge, figuring out what came next. He tried to go back to his old routine, tending to his garden and reading by the fireplace. But something felt off. The house seemed too quiet, too empty. Even the backyard, where Max used to chase squirrels and bark at passing cars, felt hollow without him. Marcus realized that part of him had hoped avenging Max would fill the void left by his loss. Instead, it had only made the emptiness more apparent. One evening, as Marcus sat staring out the window, a knock at the door startled him. He opened it cautiously, half expecting trouble. Instead, he found Mrs. Peterson, an elderly neighbor who lived 2 houses down. She held a plate of cookies in her hands and smiled warmly. "I haven't seen you around much lately," she said. "Thought I'd check in and see how you're doing." Marcus hesitated, unsure of how to respond. He hadn't spoken to any of his neighbors since moving in, preferring to keep to himself. But there was something comforting about Mrs. Peterson's kindness, her genuine concern cutting through the walls he had built around himself. "I'm okay," Marcus replied finally, stepping aside to let her in. Just dealing with some things. Mrs. Peterson nodded knowingly. Life has a way of throwing curveballs, doesn't it? If you ever need someone to talk to, my door's always open. Her words lingered in Marcus's mind long after she left. For the first time in years, someone had offered him companionship without expecting anything in return. It was a small gesture, but it meant more than Marcus cared to admit. Slowly, he began reaching out, to Mrs. Peterson, to other neighbors, to people he passed on the street. He joined a local community center, volunteering his time to help with gardening projects and neighborhood cleanups. At first, it felt strange, almost unnatural, but over time, Marcus discovered a new kind of fulfillment. Helping others gave him a sense of purpose he hadn't felt since losing Max. Still, the question of his future loomed large. Could he truly leave his violent past behind? Or was he destined to carry it with him forever, a ghost haunting his every step? Marcus wrestled with these thoughts daily, torn between the man he wanted to be and the man he feared he would always remain. Then, one day, as he walked through the park near his house, Marcus noticed a young boy sitting alone on a bench, tears streaming down his face. Curious, Marcus approached him cautiously. "What's wrong?" Marcus asked gently. The boy sniffled, clutching a crumpled piece of paper in his hand. "My dog ran away," he said, his voice trembling. "I've looked everywhere, but I can't find him." Something stirred within Marcus, a mix of empathy and sorrow. He remembered all too well what it felt like to lose a beloved companion. Without hesitation, he knelt down beside the boy. "What's your dog's name?" Marcus asked. "Buddy," the boy replied, wiping his eyes. "Well, Buddy's lucky to have someone like you looking for him," Marcus said with a reassuring smile. "Why don't we look together?" For the rest of the afternoon, Marcus helped the boy search for Buddy, combing through the park and nearby streets. Along the way, they talked about dogs, their quirks, their loyalty, the joy they brought into people's lives. Eventually, they found Buddy hiding under a bush, scared but unharmed. The boy's face lit up with relief and gratitude as he hugged his dog tightly. "Thank you," the boy said, looking up at Marcus with wide, tear-filled eyes. "You didn't have to help me, but you did." Marcus shrugged, feeling a lump rise in his throat. Sometimes helping others is the best way to heal ourselves. As he watched the boy and his dog walk away, hand in paw, Marcus felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe redemption wasn't about erasing the past. Maybe it was about building a better future. Max's memory would always be a part of him, but perhaps honoring that memory meant finding ways to protect others from experiencing the same pain he had endured. With renewed determination, Marcus decided to dedicate his life to helping those in need. He began working with animal shelters, rescuing stray dogs and finding them loving homes. He started mentoring at-risk youth, teaching them valuable skills and offering guidance whenever they needed it. And though he never sought recognition, word of his efforts spread throughout the community. People admired his selflessness, his willingness to give back despite the hardships he had faced. Years later, stories about Marcus, though few knew his real name, became part of local folklore. Some called him the Guardian, a mysterious figure who appeared in times of need, offering aid and protection. Others simply referred to him as the man who loved dogs. To Marcus, none of it mattered. What mattered was the impact he made, however small, on the lives of those around him. And somewhere deep inside, Marcus hoped that Max could see the difference he was making. Not because he sought approval, but because he wanted Max to know that his life and his death had not been in vain. Through Marcus's actions, Max's legacy lived on, inspiring acts of kindness and courage in a world that desperately needed both. In the end, Marcus realized that true strength wasn't about taking lives. It was about saving them. It was about protecting what mattered most and ensuring that love, not hate, defined his existence. As he stood beneath the big oak tree in his backyard, where Max lay buried, Marcus whispered softly, "Thank you, boy. You taught me how to live again." Months turned into years, and Marcus Johnson continued to rebuild his life piece by piece. The neighborhood that had once been plagued by the Black Viper's violence now thrived with a newfound sense of peace. Families felt safe letting their children play outside, businesses flourished without fear of extortion, and community events brought people together in ways they hadn't experienced before. While Marcus was careful not to take credit for these changes, he couldn't help but feel a quiet pride knowing that his actions had played a part in creating this safer world. Yet, despite the outward progress, Marcus still wrestled with the shadows of his past. The memories of the lives he had taken, even those belonging to the Black Vipers, weighed heavily on him. He often found himself staring at his hands, wondering if they would ever truly be clean. During sleepless nights, when the silence grew too loud, he questioned whether justice could ever justify vengeance. Was it right to kill in the name of love? Or had he simply traded one form of darkness for another? To cope with these doubts, Marcus threw himself into his work. His volunteer efforts expanded beyond animal shelters and mentoring programs. He became a pillar of support for anyone struggling in the community. Whether it was helping a single mother find affordable housing, assisting an elderly neighbor with groceries, or organizing fundraisers for local schools, Marcus made sure no one felt forgotten. People began to see him as a beacon of hope, a man who gave endlessly without asking for anything in return. But there were moments when Marcus wondered if others saw through his carefully constructed facade. Did they notice the sadness lingering behind his smile? Could they hear the faint echoes of gunfire in his voice when he spoke of protecting the vulnerable? These fears kept him guarded, even as he opened his heart to those around him. Still, he pressed on, determined to honor Max's memory by being someone worthy of respect, not just because of what he had done, but because of who he chose to become. One crisp autumn morning, as golden leaves swirled in the breeze, Marcus received an unexpected visitor. A young woman named Lisa stood nervously at his doorstep, clutching a folder filled with papers. She introduced herself as a journalist working on a story about unsolved crimes in Chicago. Her curiosity had been piqued by rumors of the Ghost, the mysterious figure who had dismantled the Black Vipers nearly 5 years earlier. Though she didn't know Marcus's true identity, her research had led her to his doorstep. "I'm sorry to bother you," Lisa said, shifting uncomfortably under Marcus's steady gaze, "but I've heard so much about the incredible work you do in the community. I thought maybe you might have some insight into what happened to the Black Vipers." Marcus hesitated, his mind racing. He had spent years keeping his secrets, buried, ensuring that no trace of his violent past resurfaced. Yet something about Lisa's sincerity struck a chord within him. Perhaps it was the way her eyes sparkled with genuine curiosity, or the fact that she seemed more interested in understanding than sensationalizing. Whatever it was, Marcus found himself inviting her inside. Over coffee, Lisa explained her project. She wasn't looking to glorify violence or expose vigilantes. Instead, she wanted to explore how ordinary people could inspire extraordinary change. As she spoke, Marcus realized that her intentions aligned closely with his own desires to leave behind a legacy of compassion rather than destruction. When Lisa finally broached the topic of the Ghost, Marcus leaned back in his chair, choosing his words carefully. "I don't know who the Ghost is," he said truthfully. "But whoever he is or was, he must have believed deeply in justice. Maybe that's why people remember him so vividly." Lisa nodded thoughtfully. "Do you think someone like that can ever really escape their past? Or are they defined by the things they've done?" The question lingered in the air, heavy with meaning. Marcus considered it for a long moment before responding. "I think we're all shaped by our choices, good or bad. What matters most is whether we use those experiences to make better ones moving forward." His answer seemed to satisfy Lisa, though she left with more questions than answers. For Marcus, however, the conversation sparked a deeper reckoning. If he truly wanted to move forward, perhaps it was time to confront the parts of himself he had tried so hard to bury. In the weeks that followed, Marcus revisited old haunts from his days as the Ghost. He walked through the abandoned warehouse where he had first struck against the Black Vipers, now overgrown with weeds and graffiti-covered walls. He stood in the parking lot where the botched drug deal had unfolded, imagining the chaos he had orchestrated. Each location stirred up conflicting emotions: pride in what he had accomplished, shame for the methods he had used. At Max's grave site beneath the oak tree, Marcus knelt silently, tracing the outline of the makeshift headstone he had carved years ago. "You showed me what it means to love unconditionally," he whispered. "And because of you, I learned how to fight for something greater than myself. But I need your guidance now, boy. How do I keep going without losing sight of who I want to be?" As if in response, a gentle breeze rustled the leaves above him, carrying with it the faint scent of earth and pine. It was a small comfort, yet enough to remind Marcus that healing wasn't linear. It was a journey filled with ups and downs. And while he might never fully escape the ghosts of his past, he could choose how to carry them. Determined to embrace this new chapter, Marcus decided to share his story, not publicly, but with those closest to him. One evening he gathered Mrs. Peterson, a few neighbors, and several volunteers from the community center in his living room. Over tea and cookies, he recounted snippets of his journey: the loss of Max, the campaign against the Black Vipers, and the struggles he faced. In finding redemption, he omitted specific details, focusing instead on the lessons he had learned about resilience, forgiveness, and the power of giving back. To his surprise, the group listened intently, their expressions ranging from awe to empathy. When he finished speaking, Mrs. Peterson reached out and placed a hand on his shoulder. "Marcus," she said softly, "you've already done more good than most people will in a lifetime. Don't let guilt hold you back from seeing the person you've become." Her words resonated deeply, offering Marcus a sense of closure he hadn't realized he needed. From that day forward, he committed to living openly, not hiding from his past, but acknowledging it as part of his story. He continued volunteering, mentoring, and advocating for those in need, channeling his energy into creating positive change. Years later, when Lisa published her article, it focused not on the ghost but on the ripple effects of courage and kindness. She wrote about individuals like Marcus, whose quiet acts of heroism transformed communities. Though Marcus's name was never mentioned, he recognized himself in the stories she told. It was a fitting tribute, one that celebrated the light he had brought into the world, rather than the darkness he had left behind. Underneath the big oak tree, Marcus planted a sapling in memory of Max. As he watered the young tree, he smiled faintly, imagining Max bounding through the yard, tail wagging furiously. "This isn't goodbye," he murmured. "It's thank you for everything." And in that moment, surrounded by the beauty of nature and the promise of new beginnings, Marcus finally felt at peace. Years passed, and Marcus Johnson's life settled into a rhythm of quiet purpose. The neighborhood continued to thrive, its streets alive with laughter and the hum of everyday life. Children played freely in parks once ruled by fear, and neighbors greeted each other warmly, their bonds strengthened by shared struggles and victories. Though Marcus remained humble about his role in transforming the community, there was no denying the impact he had made. His dedication to helping others had become a cornerstone of the area's revival, earning him respect and admiration from all who knew him. Yet, despite the outward appearance of contentment, Marcus still carried the weight of his past. The memories of violence, the lives he had taken, the chaos he had unleashed, were never far from his mind. But over time he learned to live alongside them, finding solace in the belief that his actions had ultimately served a greater good. Max's memory guided him, a constant reminder of why he had chosen this path. Every act of kindness, every life touched, felt like a tribute to the loyal companion who had inspired it all. One chilly winter morning, as snow blanketed the ground and turned the world into a serene canvas of white, Marcus received an unexpected letter. It arrived in a plain envelope bearing no return address. Curious, he opened it to find a handwritten note inside. "To the man they call the Ghost. If you're reading this, then my mission is complete. For years I've followed your story. Not just the whispers of vengeance, but the tales of redemption. That came after. You reminded me that even those burdened by darkness can choose to walk toward the light. Inspired by your example, I left my own violent past behind and dedicated myself to protecting the innocent. Thank you for showing me that change is possible. Wherever you are, I hope you've found the peace you deserve. The note was unsigned, but its message resonated deeply with Marcus. Someone out there had been watching him, not as a ghostly figure of fear, but as a symbol of hope. The realization filled him with a profound sense of fulfillment. He hadn't set out to inspire anyone. He had simply tried to honor Max's memory. Yet here was proof that his journey had meaning beyond what he could have imagined. That evening, Marcus attended a small gathering at the community center. The event was organized to celebrate the opening of a new youth mentoring program, a project he had championed tirelessly over the past year. As he stood among the crowd, listening to speeches and applause, he noticed Lisa, the journalist who had once sought answers about the ghost. She approached him with a warm smile, holding a copy of her latest book. "I wanted you to see this," she said, handing it to him. "It's not just about unsolved crimes anymore. It's about people like you, those who rise above their circumstances to make a difference." Marcus flipped through the pages, his eyes scanning familiar stories rewritten with compassion and insight. There were no names, no direct references to his past, but he recognized himself in the narrative. It wasn't the story of a hitman turned avenger. It was the story of a man who chose love over hate, healing over destruction. Tears welled up in his eyes as he realized the true power of storytelling, to transform pain into purpose and loss into legacy. As the months went by, Marcus's influence continued to grow. The youth mentoring program flourished, providing guidance and support to dozens of young people. Many of them looked up to Marcus as a mentor and confidant, someone who understood their struggles and believed in their potential. Among them was a teenage boy named Jamal, whose rough exterior masked a heart full of dreams. Jamal reminded Marcus of himself at that age, angry, lost, and searching for direction. Through patience and encouragement, Marcus helped Jamal channel his energy into art, introducing him to painting as a form of expression. One day, while working on a mural together, Jamal asked a question that caught Marcus off guard. "Why do you do all this? Why spend so much time helping people who barely know you?" Marcus paused, paintbrush in hand, considering the question. "Because everyone deserves a chance to be better than they were yesterday," he replied. "And because sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can change someone's entire life." Jamal nodded thoughtfully, his gaze fixed on the mural taking shape before them. It depicted a lone wolf standing beneath a starlit sky, surrounded by blooming flowers. To Marcus, it symbolized resilience, the ability to rise above adversity and create beauty from ashes. He hoped Jamal would see it too, as a reflection of his own potential. By spring, the sapling Marcus had planted in Max's memory had grown taller, its branches reaching skyward with newfound strength. Beneath its shade, Marcus held informal gatherings, inviting neighbors and friends to share stories and laughter. These moments became sacred to him, a reminder of the connections he had forged and the lives he had touched. Max's spirit lived on not only in these gatherings but also in the countless dogs Marcus had rescued and rehomed over the years. Each wagging tail and joyful bark brought him closer to the peace he had long sought. One sunny afternoon, as Marcus sat on his porch sipping tea, Mrs. Peterson stopped by with a photo album in hand. "I thought you might like to see this," she said, flipping it open to reveal pictures of community events, volunteer projects, and smiling faces. On one page, there was a snapshot of Marcus kneeling beside a group of children, their arms wrapped around a playful puppy. The caption read, "Heroes come in all shapes and sizes." Marcus chuckled softly, shaking his head. "I'm no hero," he said. "Just a man trying to do the right thing." Mrs. Peterson placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "You don't have to wear a cape to be a hero, Marcus. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is keep going when the world tries to pull you down." Her words stayed with him long after she left, echoing in his mind like a mantra. They reminded him of how far he had come, from a haunted hitman seeking revenge to a compassionate advocate for change. The road hadn't been easy, but every step had been worth it. In the final chapter of his journey, Marcus came to understand that redemption wasn't about erasing the past, it was about learning from it. The scars he carried, the guilt, the grief, the regrets, were part of who he was. But so were the lives he had saved, the hearts he had healed, and the hope he had ignited in others. Together they formed a tapestry of resilience woven with threads of both darkness and light. Underneath the oak tree, now strong and vibrant thanks to years of care, Marcus knelt once more. He whispered a silent thank you to Max, knowing that none of this would have been possible without the bond they had shared. Then, rising to his feet, he gazed out at the neighborhood he had helped rebuild. It was imperfect as all things are, but it was alive with possibility. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Marcus felt a deep sense of peace wash over him. He had honored Max's memory not through vengeance, but through love. And in doing so, he had discovered something invaluable: the strength to protect what mattered most. Somewhere, in the quiet corners of the universe, Max watched over him, tail wagging furiously, proud of the man Marcus had become.